네, 자연을 지키는 틀을 바꾸다.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the
2025
2025 Green Conference Rights of Nature, Challenging the Framework to Protect. My name is Ha Gun-jung, an activist with Green Korea United. I'll be your host and guide for today's conference. This is already the third year Green Korea United has held a conference on the theme of rights of nature. Our reflections have deepened. And in this conference, we have speakers joining from the United States, Jeju, Ireland, Ecuador, and the parts of the world. And we are going to broaden our imagination beyond human-centered perspectives and explore possibilities that serve all beings. Except for the pre-recorded keynote speech, each session will be followed by a live Q&A with the speaker. To encourage open participation, we have prepared a Padlet board for each speaker where you can leave your questions. Your question may become a key insight for someone else, so please feel free to share anything you're curious about. We'll select the several questions and we'll have the speaker to answer that. Before we begin, I have one more announcement. We are running 2 participant events during the Green Conference. And let me introduce the first one. If you take a screenshot wearing an outfit or holding an item that represents a being you would like to grant rights of nature to, upload it and you will receive a special rights of nature hat. So please make sure that you join the event. So I hope that you can win the cap. Now, we'd like to begin, but before you that, I'd like to celebrate 102 people joining us today. So now let's begin the 2025 Green Conference, Changing the Framework to Protect Nature. Let's begin with the big round of applause. Thank you. Let me introduce our keynote speaker. When it comes to rights of nature, which country comes to your mind? The United States, New Zealand, maybe? But for me, it's Ecuador. The first country in the world to enshrine the rights of nature in its constitution. And our speaker, the first speaker, is Mr. Thomas Linzey, an environmental attorney from the United States, has served as an advisor to Ecuador's Constitutional Assembly. He's joining us today. And he is currently serving as senior legal counsel at the Center for Democratic Environmental Rights, or CDER. In addition to his work on the Ecuadorian Constitution, he drafted the world's first rights of nature ordinance in 2006. So he had led the global movements for the rights of nature and community rights. And he has helped establish hundreds of related laws across the world. Due to the time difference, today's keynote speech was pre-recorded. So now, let's welcome Mr. Thomas Linzey to the screen.
So it's good to be with everybody today, even if it's virtually, but I've been asked to talk about the general movement towards recognizing the rights of nature around the globe. And so we're going to talk about that movement. And the first question that people generally ask when we talk about the rights of nature is, what is it? What do we mean when we say rights of nature? And essentially, it's the recognition by written law, so a law passed by a governmental entity or by a judge or a court, of the legally enforceable rights of nature as a whole, or of species and ecosystems. So generally, when we talk to folks about this concept, we're talking about taking human rights and how human rights have been treated under constitutions and various legal mechanisms, like in South Korea, Chapter 2 of the South Korean Constitution, dealing with the right of personal liberty, freedom of residence, freedom of occupation, freedom of speech. Those types of human rights, which are the highest way, the highest form of legal protection under the law to recognize those rights, taking that concept of human rights and transferring it to nature, so that nature is protected with the same kind of rights framework. So we think human rights under the law and then elevating the protection of nature to that highest form of legal protection, which is rights. So once again, either by written law or by jurisprudence, court-made law of the legal rights of nature. So this isn't about resolutions or declarations. It's about binding legal rights for nature. People also ask sometimes, what are some of those rights that have been recognized in these rights of nature laws? So these are actual rights that have been recognized by laws around the globe: right to exist, thrive, evolve, right to restoration, a right to habitat, right to flow for certain rivers or waterways. These are the types of rights we're talking about. And again, legally enforceable rights, not just declarations, but actually rights that are enforceable under the law and in courts. So another question we get asked is, why do we need rights of nature? Well, primarily it's because most of our environmental law frameworks treat nature as a commodity or as property, basically as a thing that lacks even a basic right to exist. And whereas we think about environmental laws as being protective under our current system of law, environmental laws actually legalize certain harms. So, for example, if you wanted to dump waste into a river that would currently be legal, that governments often issue permits that make it legal. So that environmental laws kind of legalize certain environmental harms, like fracking or drilling, extraction, filling of wetlands, climate change, those types of things that, even though we think about environmental laws as protective, generally they're actually about legalizing certain environmental harms. And I think the question we get less now is, why rights of nature? Why treating nature as a thing or as property is a problem? We see the problem all around us, whether it's ecosystem collapse, species extinction, or climate change. We're kind of on this path to environmental destruction and degradation on a scale that we haven't really seen yet, and that we can barely imagine. When we talk about rights of nature, we usually trace the origins of the rights of nature back to First Nations or indigenous communities. In the US and also around the globe, First Nations treat nature as something that can't be owned. They tend to speak about nature as a living being or as a relative, but they treat nature differently from a cosmology standpoint than Western systems of law do, in terms of treating nature not as property, but as something different. And that difference can be seen when we look at a comparison between Western systems of law, or civil systems of law in some ways, and indigenous or First Nations systems, cultural systems, as well as legal systems. On the indigenous side, nature is treated as a living being. The Anishinaabe people in the U.S. and the state of Minnesota talk about the flying people and the singing people being the birds and the fish. The swimming people being the fish, flying people being the birds. The Yurok Nation, a tribal nation in California, state of California, treats the Klamath River as a relative or as a living being. And contrast that to a Western system of law, which treats nature essentially as a dead thing or as a resource. It's why we talk in terms of natural resources rather than using other words to describe the natural environment. And of course, philosopher Sir Francis Bacon, big Western philosopher, used to talk about torturing nature on a rack to extract her secrets. I don't know about you, but I can't hold those two things in one hand. Talking about the flying people, the swimming people, and the singing people, yet talking about torturing nature on a medieval torture instrument to extract her secrets. So two completely different systems, completely different cultural systems, which are reflected in the legal systems of those cultures. Some key elements of rights of nature laws that have been passed around the globe. So again, this is legislation, rights of nature laws that have been passed. The first element in most of these laws has been a recognition of rights, which makes sense. You're declaring or creating certain rights for nature. So nature is recognized as a living entity with certain binding legal rights. The second piece is enforcement. So the rights themselves would be no good without enforcement. You have to find a way to actually provide a way to actually enforce the rights. In most of the communities that we've worked in the US and around the world, any member of a community, any resident of a community that's passed a rights of nature law has the legal authority to represent the ecosystem in the system of law to bring a lawsuit to enforce those particular rights. And we're going to see that in a couple minutes, where in the U.S. and in other places, we don't have people as plaintiffs. You actually have ecosystems as plaintiffs in cases, as litigants in cases in courts over rights of nature. And then the third element is remedy. There has to be something that you win when you're done with these cases. And most of the wins, the remedies in these laws come down to restoration of the damaged ecosystem back to its pre-damaged state. So recognition of rights, enforcement, and remedy. And then in addition to that, governments that pass rights of nature laws actually need to change their existing codes, their existing laws, to comply or conform with the rights of nature law that's passed. After all, you can't allow development in a floodplain if you have a rights of nature law that have been passed to protect that floodplain in the first place. So you need to change your existing laws to recognize the passage of that rights of nature law. Most people, when they hear about rights of nature, hear about Ecuador first. It's the first national constitution to enshrine the rights of nature, which happened in 2008. And I know Natty Green will be talking more about Ecuador, so we're going to go pretty quickly through this. But these are the articles in the Ecuadorian constitution that we helped to write. Articles 71, 72, and 73 basically holds that nature has a right to exist, maintain, regenerate its life cycle, structure, functions, and evolutionary processes. Nature has a right to restoration, and that the state has a responsibility to apply certain measures to protect those rights. Again, the Ecuadorian Constitution, this is the actual text that passed in 2008. We use this slide to talk about, what happened next after the Ecuadorian constitutional provisions were passed. There have been a bunch of cases heard by the Constitutional Court, which is the highest court in Ecuador to hear constitutional issues, which rights of nature became. But you'll see in these cases, the Vilcabamba River case where the river was a plaintiff to protect its flow against having waste dumped into the river. The shrimp case in 2015 dealt with a shrimp farm in a fragile mangrove ecosystem. Perhaps the case that's become the most famous is the Los Cedros case, which is a cloud forest in Ecuador, where rights of nature were used to overturn mining permits, with the court holding that the rights of the cloud forest would be violated if the mining permits were not overturned. A couple other cases as well, but all to say that the Ecuadorian constitutional provisions have been enforced. And that certain things have been recognized. Nature is a subject of rights. People have standing to invoke those rights. They've also been invoked in other cases dealing with shark finning and a variety of other criminal and civil cases as well. So a lot of enforcement following that Ecuadorian constitutional provisions being inserted into the Ecuadorian constitution as the first national constitution. Panama passed a rights of sea turtles law back in 2023. We talk about this just as an example of rights of nature laws being applied to a specific species. So protecting turtle rights as a piece of written legislation at the national level in Panama. These are the places that have passed rights of nature laws over the past 20 years. National level, we're talking Ecuador, Bolivia, Uganda, New Zealand, Panama, and Spain. State and local laws have been passed in places like Brazil, Mexico, Canada, and of course in the United States. And then local policies have been passed by governments in Northern Ireland. Linda Sullivan will talk more about that in a couple minutes. England, Ireland, and Australia. So what started in a very small community, the first rights of nature law was passed in a very small community of 10,000 people just northwest of Philadelphia, the United States, has spread to these other places and been adopted by these other places as well. Some key court decisions, Colombia, India, Bangladesh, and Peru, judges have jumped in. Even though there aren't written laws that have been passed in these places, courts have begun to recognize things like glaciers and rivers and other ecosystems as having certain rights. So not just written law, but actually court-made law or judges moving forward with these decisions as well. In the U.S., indigenous communities, First Nations, have been at the forefront of passing rights of nature laws. This is the list of the different tribes in the U.S. that have passed rights of nature laws, including at the very end, The most recent was the tribe called the Rappahannock tribe in the state of Virginia. They became the first to put rights of nature into their tribal constitution. So not just a regular law, but actually a constitution of the tribe. And that happened in 2024 to protect the Rappahannock River, which is very important culturally to the Rappahannock tribe. So people ask about enforcement in the U.S. There have been 3 enforcement cases that have been filed in the U.S. Again, much more enforcement in other countries than the U.S. But these are the 3 cases. We talk about these 3 cases because to show how different they are from conventional litigation. In each of these cases, you have the ecosystem itself or the species itself as a plaintiff. So in the first one, you have a stream that sued a developer in Florida. The second one was wild rice, which is culturally important for the Ojibwe, the Chippewa tribe in the state of Minnesota in the U.S. You have wild rice as a plaintiff. In the third one, you have salmon, the fish species itself as a plaintiff. And these 3 were brought to challenge or stop different kinds of development. The first one was a housing commercial development. The second one was a tar sands oil pipeline that threatened wild rice in the state of Minnesota. And the third one was a case against the city of Seattle because the city of Seattle uses hydroelectric dams that block salmon from being able to spawn upstream. And so 2 of these were unsuccessful. The last one resulted in a settlement with the city of Seattle, which forced fish passage to be included around those hydroelectric dams. But kind of just a short example of 3 of the cases that have been brought in the U.S. around rights of nature laws. One of the important things that's rarely talked about is that these rights of nature laws can be enforced outside of the area that passes them or outside of the tribal reservation that passes them. Because, of course, ecosystems don't recognize municipal boundaries. So when we draw lines around counties or districts or boroughs, those don't necessarily align with ecosystem boundaries or bioregions. And so if a river is accorded rights within a city, then whatever happens upstream from that river that's protected within the city can be the subject of a lawsuit to try to stop what's happening upstream from the reservation or municipality because it violates the rights of nature when that river or waterway actually enters the area that has passed a rights of nature laws. And so in the U.S., we have the highest court in the land, the U.S. Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court, which has held that tribal governments especially can enforce their rights of nature laws outside of tribal boundaries. So if there's activities of a non-tribal actor like a state or a corporation that's affecting something on the reservation, that the tribes have the power to actually bring a lawsuit against that using the rights of nature laws. So to finish up, I wanted to talk about some very new emerging things that are happening with rights of nature in the U.S. and a couple other countries. They include rights of nature easements and something called land that owns itself, which is a brand new cutting edge application of rights of nature. There are new models of protecting land. And generally, we use these when we're operating in an area that won't pass a rights of nature law, that politically it's impossible to get one passed. And so this means working with landowners. We've created a process whereby landowners can recognize rights of nature on their property through changing their deed and their title. So instead of passing a rights of nature law, we actually take the rights of nature and embed it in these easements. And then the second project, the land that owns itself, means putting together a legal entity which is essentially owned by the ecosystems themselves on a parcel of land, and then transferring the deed itself to that entity so that the land owns itself, the mountain owns itself, giving nature agency through this process. So with the easements, there's no need to get too complicated about this, but property owners have the ability to take their deeds, their title, their ownership, evidence of ownership, and actually amend them with rights of nature language so that they, as a property owner, can place rights of nature into that deed or title and create rights of nature, enforceable rights of nature on that parcel of land. We've now created those in 4 U.S. states. It's kind of, again, the cutting edge of moving rights of nature stuff forward when you're not in a place that will pass a binding law. And perhaps the edge of the universe here, cutting edge of the cutting edge, is the land that owns itself, which means eliminating private ownership altogether. So for these projects, we take the climate, water, plant, animal ecosystems of a specific land parcel. We create a legal entity which legally is comprised of those ecosystems as owners. And then that particular legal entity then assumes title. So the deed transfers to those ecosystems, thus completing this land that owns itself concept of nature, not just having rights, but having complete agency. So removing private land ownership altogether, creating an entity that can legally own the land, but that entity itself is controlled entirely by the ecosystems on the land. The first pilot project was completed about 6 months ago. It's a 30-acre mountain in the state of Colorado. It was given to us to transform into this land that owns itself. It's the first mountain that owns itself in the U.S. Under a Western system of law. And it has an indigenous guardianship council that's been created to help manage the land. So again, deed is held by the ecosystem. So when you look up the land ownership record, you'll see that the mountain itself actually holds its own title. So again, eliminating human ownership in the interest of creating agency for nature, kind of a beyond rights of nature project, but we think it's the future for rights of nature work to combine it with this land that owns itself concept. And anybody that wants more information on this work, our webpage is there, Center for Environmental Rights.org. We have trainings as well as we maintain a quarterly rights of nature timeline about all rights of nature developments from 2006 through 2025. So if anybody wants more information, that's the place to go.
여러분, 다양한 사례를
Wow,
통해
I think he just gave you some more tangible idea what is the concept of the rights of the nature. So due to the time differences, he just prepared the recorded video. So we'd like to ask the first question first of all. How is the rights of nature movement unfolding in the United States? Does it operate in solidarity with indigenous tribes, or does it take the form of opposing local development by bringing nature forward as a plaintiff?
So we have some questions that have been submitted that we wanted to answer. One of the questions that was submitted deals with the rights of nature movement as it's developed in the U.S. What's the way that it's been developing? Is it with tribal nations, local community ordinances, or bringing cases? I think it's important to recognize that the most aggressive advocates right now for rights of nature in the U.S. are tribal governments, indigenous communities who have been passing them at a faster clip and also enforcing them more than others. But it's also important to recognize that whenever we bring a case, it's always an enforcement case of a written law. And so, if we were working in South Korea, for example, that we would be working at probably the local governmental level, that local governments, county governments, districts have power to pass environmental laws of some sort within South Korea, but that the lawsuits themselves are built on top of those written laws. So it's a way of actually creating the legal platform that you need through the written laws to actually then do the litigation on top of those.
Continuing on, I'd like to move on to the second question. Please show the screen. With more tribes adopting rights of nature resolutions, it appears that various rights of nature initiatives are emerging across the United States. Does this create conflicts with the developers?
So another question that we were asked is that since several tribes have adopted rights of nature resolutions, have there been significant conflicts? between development interests or corporate interests and governmental entities? And the answer to that question is yes, there has. But under existing U.S. law, those confrontations always result in a victory for the property owner. With rights of nature laws, you've thrown a wrench in the process to actually make it look a lot different. And one of those initiatives, the three enforcement cases in the U.S. were all brought against development interests. The case in Florida was brought against a housing and commercial developer. The case in Minnesota was brought against the state government that was trying to permit a big fossil fuel pipeline coming down through the central part of the United States. And of course, the Sox-Seattle salmon case was brought against the hydroelectric power dams. And what's interesting about these cases is that when you insert rights of nature into this kind of legal framework, that you're changing the way that the law is applied. Doesn't mean you're automatically going to win, but it means that in the past, the automatic winner was the property owner, which is protected in the U.S., at least through our constitutional framework. Now it's a slightly different inquiry because you've put right against right. It's no longer regulation against right or something subordinate to the property owner against the property owner. You've now leveled the playing field or the odds. So you're dealing with rights of nature versus property rights, and you're on an even keel. This work is, from an organizing standpoint, is about trying to change the dynamic because we've been losing for the last 20 years from an environmental standpoint to actually putting it into a framework whereby we have a chance of actually winning something. And the rights of nature are a big piece of that because it changes the dynamic about how courts look at it. Also, when you put it into written law, it gives you that platform to work off of.
I think some are very similar to cases in Korea and some are very opposite to Korea. Let me move on to the last question. In Korea, there's no indigenous tribes with an established nature-centered philosophy. Uncontrolled development is occurring nationwide, and local residents are often divided into pro-development and anti-development. Despite this, Jeju Island is currently working to designate the Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphin as the nation's first ecological legal entity. In this process, conflicts may arise regarding the selection of guardians as well as with the local stakeholders whose livelihoods depends on the sea. As a country that recognizes ecological legal entity, what advice would you give to Korea?
And then the final question dealt with the Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphin, the efforts to recognize personhood. And a question about what advice might we offer as folks begin or continue doing this work. And it's tough because country to country is so different. And so it takes a while to begin to understand the written law and also how you can act. But I think Article 35 of South Korean law dealing with local government powers, sometimes it's difficult to envision a written law moving at the national level. It's taken a long time to do that in different places. I think the more flexible place to operate is probably within the local governments, whether that's your tier 1 or tier 2, the lower and the higher, but finding local governments that might be willing to implement and adopt rights of nature laws. And in fact, for the dolphin, one thing we've done in the past, whether it's been in Newfoundland and Canada or other places, finding local governments that have some kind of jurisdiction over ocean environments. In other words, ones that are on the coast, where you can make a claim to passing a written law to protect ocean animals or ocean ecosystems. And the first ocean rights law really emerged in Newfoundland that we drafted in Canada a couple years ago. But finding a way to we use the term bootstrap jurisdiction around written laws, and then trying to find a place that is amenable to passing those written laws. I think litigation by itself is difficult to do unless you have that platform of a written law underneath it, which actually defines how the litigation will go forward. And so I think that's the only advice we have. But again, it's tough to give advice when you're in a different country because we don't know the politics or the culture or even the written legal system there. But I think to crack that nut, I think I would attempt to go through the local government framework and pass a rights of nature law within one of those local governments. Thank you, everybody, for your time today.
네, 토마스 린제이.
How do you like his keynote speech? Somebody calls ecosystem as the tribes and the relatives, but some consider the nature as dead beings. So it was a very meaningful time for us to look back on how we deal with nature. So he made a great opening for this conference, and the attorney, thank you for wonderful the presentation. Please give him a big hand for him to hear our big applause in the United
네, 감사합니다.
Next, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. She began her work in dolphin research after participating in the 2013 Jeju release project, and she's now the director of MARC, the Marine Animal Research and Conservation Institute, an organization dedicated to studying and conserving marine wildlife. She studies marine species such as Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphins and sea turtles, while also leading public campaigns. So she is half researcher, half activist. Today, she will share insights into the process of establishing legal personhood for Jeju in the Pacific bottlenose dolphins. If you have any questions during the talk, please leave them in the speaker-specific Padlet question board. She believes that the sea with dolphin is much beautiful than the one without them. Let's welcome her.
네, 안녕하십니까.
Good afternoon. My name is Jang Soo-jin of MARC. Today, I'm going to talk about the Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphins of Jeju as an ecological corporation. It is quite inspiring that it is working to be designated as ecological corporations, but there are things that we have to consider. So the participants in this room must have great interest, but ecological corporation is giving legal personhood to ecosystems or wildlife whose ecological value is significant. In Jeju, for the conservation of ecological values and sustainable management, ecological corporation movement is taking place. So it's a great fundamental shift in how we view nature. And recently, the ecological corporation proposal was made only recently. So the significance of introducing the ecological corporation system will be now shared. So this emphasizes the responsibility toward wildlife affected by human activities. And it has great significance because it can contribute to the conservation of Jeju's marine ecosystem. The reason is because Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphin was chosen as the subject for corporation. It's because of the danger the species is facing. So these are the threats. And these Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphins live near the shore. So the far they go is 2 kilometers from the shore. So it means that they live very closely to the shore. Throughout the year that you can see the dolphins. As you can see, the whole island of Jeju is their habitat, but you see especially the southern west side and the east side is their major habitats. And then they do social behaviors, and also they take resting and feeding and traveling. So these core habitats show that they mainly do social activities and the feedings. Throughout Jeju, the core habitat is only 22%. The shore development is now shrinking the core habitats. I'd like to pose the problems that we're facing at the moment. When you do any activities in the marine area, that you need to go through the environmental impact assessment. Especially the northeastern side and then southern and western side are the key habitats. And this is the announcement made by the Jeju. And can you please look at the highlighted, red highlighted ones? And these circles are the energy developing areas. And this is the Jeju Special Self-Governing Province Marine Spatial Management Plan. So these red circled areas are key areas for energy development, but at the same time, these are the core habitat areas for the Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphins. And also, several years ago, that the wind farm was decided to be built around this core habitats. And in this process, the EIA was conducted. And it says that they haven't witnessed the Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphins. And it says only a few times they witnessed the dolphins only in July, August, and October. So this EIA was passed. But during that time, that we conducted the research by using a special device, and then we witnessed that almost every day that we witnessed in the Pacific bottlenose dolphins. And despite such active activation of the dolphins, the environmental impact assessment said it didn't see the dolphins. So now there's conversation going on about developing the area for the energy development. Another issue is marine debris. You see this waste or the plastic bags and these farming gears and debris is now on the fin of the dolphin. And another issue is recreational fishing. When it comes to the marine debris, that we tend to think of the fishing, the farm debris. However, recreational fishing is also creating a lot of waste. And as you can see, fishing float is entangling the dolphin. So some part of the dolphin's body is cut off. And you can see 2019. The photo is now stuck in some kind of net. So the fin at the tail was cut off. And also in 2021, that you can see another entanglement. In 2021, August and September was the same species. When we witnessed that it was the fishing, some kind of like net, but now it goes deeper, and eventually that it kills the species, the dolphin. So to solve these issues, that we've been working closely with the Ministry of Marine. Actually, the Ministry of Marine designated a certain area as marine protected area. So Shindori area is the highlighted one on the map. So it's very significant. But the issue is the southern west side. You see, this protected area is very small. MPA is very important. It's because once the MPA is designated, there are things that are banned. Catching, collecting, transplanting, or damaging marine organisms designated by the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, or installing explosives, nets, or trapping gear to catch or harm, these are all banned. And to bend further, that the additional legislation has to be made. So only the partial of the southern part of the island is designated as MPA. However, this MPA area is subject to the major activity ban only. So it stops major development. However, I don't think this MPA is good enough. MPA is taking place. It's because this ensures the ecology of that certain area can be helpful for not only for the nature but for the human beings. So we believe that the MPA is beneficial for the next generations. So designation is not enough. So management is the key of MPA. Designating certain area as MPA and leaving it as it is, then there will be no change with the current and the past. But the change lies in the management, meticulous management, and how we deliver those systems in the future. Then we can restore more species. And another threat that the dolphin is getting is the ship tourism, the tour ship. At the main habitat that dolphin watch boats are very popular. And since 2005, the many boats are visiting to see dolphins. And they use jet skis to go close to the dolphin. And the boat goes around the boat and with the land and the ocean, the boat herds the dolphin. And you see that there are many boats circling the dolphins. You see this distance? It's only 300 meters from the shore. This is problem. It's because that eventually that it affects their behaviors. And the short-term impact, it causes changes in movement, altered diving behaviors, and changes in breeding patterns. And they also alter communication patterns. These are the short-term impacts. However, it causes long-term impacts. When these short-term impacts are accumulated, they are combined and causing much worse problems. So it causes decline in population health, and it causes the death rates, and also it changes in habitat use patterns. As you can see from the graph that the dolphin sound is changes depending on the boat sound. When we go to a crowded place, that we tend to say only loud and short phrases. It's like the same. If dolphins are irritated by the boat noise, then they use different sound to communicate with their dolphin species. And again, the boats cause damages on the bodies of the dolphin. Dolphins can't read the changes of the movement. So, movements of the boat. So, dolphins are curious, and when they come close, as you can see from the photos, their fins are cut off. 2022, the right side of the photo, the right one and the upper left is the same dolphin. So the dolphin had damage on its fin and got another damage on the fin. So as you go deeper to the dolphin, although it's quite delicate, of course you can't avoid damage. So to reduce such damage, that the standards for tour vessel were established. So it says restrictions on approaching dolphins, and the boat have to wait until the dolphins approach voluntarily, and no more than 3 vessels may be within 300 meters of a dolphin group at the same time. And if they go against this rule, then up to 2 million won fine will be subjected. And after this, you see, after the standard was designated, that we witness that these boats are coming close to the dolphin, and it's very close, within less than 100. And you see, it is the boats are following the dolphin. And the closest one was 160 meter between the boat and the dolphin. Then, of course, it is a violation of the regulation of going close, less within 300 meters. So, despite the standard, the enforcement is not taking place. Although there are standards, no additional workforce or personnel was dedicated. So violation is not kept on closely. So it only relies on the people who are monitoring the violation. To do that, you have to film it on the mobile phone. However, often it is rejected because it cannot prove prove the distance between the boat and the dolphin. And even though you'd like to monitor through the drone, that you can get image of the vessel's name. So obviously that we have the standard, we have the system, but the enforcement lacks. Because of these threats, dolphins are being damaged not only by natural causes, but by pollutions. There are many issues causing the health of dolphins, and that is also caused by recreational fishing activities, and it leads to health deterioration due to habitat degradation. So the Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphins have been living in Jeju as long as human beings. So the dolphins are important ones because it's flagship species. They are the apex predators. They regulate prey populations and also they maintain ecological balance. So they are playing the key role in keeping the ecological healthy. So although their population is not high, they play important role in the ecology. So we are not sure how their population decrease would affect. However, that they are mammals like us, so we have to protect them. When I talked about other the reason I brought up about the legislation issues is because that I'd like to touch upon this question: designation of an ecological corporation. How effective can it really be? And I'd like to talk about these special legislation proposed by a lawmaker, and it was established as a provincial ordinance. Now it has given the dolphins some rights. It can be now the dolphins have the rights, like the right to demand the preservation and protection of its habitat. If you look at the left and bottom, the governor may provide appropriate compensation to regions or individuals who suffer economic damage due to an ecological corporation designation. I'm not saying this is problematic. There must be the different stakeholders who are conflicting their interests. If you look at the bottom, right bottom, it reads An ecological corporation may exercise its legal rights through the management authority designated by the governor. So depending on the governor's preference, it can be influenced. So after this, a review report on the partial amendment to the Special Act on the establishment of Jeju Special Self-Governing Province and the development of the Jeju Free International City was issued. So it says that there can be some conflicts, so it needs a close monitor. Introduction of ecological corporation has significance. This is the first attempt in Korea. It has a historical meaning. For it to have significance, it needs a long-term research. And based on that, we need to come up with more measures. So since human beings designate the corporation, it can be affected by the humans' decisions. And without detailed effective provisions, it may remain symbolic rather than functionally effective. So there are many things that the follow-up things we have to monitor. I love the book Last Chance to See. And let's read this. So preserving one species is not only for our own benefit. The reason regenerative energy is not only for our own benefit. This is for all species living together with us and for us to nurture the earth and for us to have better world. So I believe this ecological corporation designation movement needs more attention. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Chang Soo-jin. I had a chance to witness Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphins, and I was actually shocked to see that the dolphins were chased by the boat. And of course, that you would not be happy if somebody chases you in your habitat. Of course, ecological corporation designation is important. However, even though after the MPA is designated, if the enforcement is not followed up, then you can't expect the regulation to be effective. So I'd like to emphasize this. The Marine Protection Area designation and Ecological Corporation designation need your continued support. Now, let's begin Q&A session. Among questions, we'd like to cover this question. What are the country institutions that have been helpful or cooperative with these ecological cooperation efforts? I think Jeju is one of them. From your perspective, it can be Jeju or the national organizations. Can you share some positive moments? I think this attempt of designating ecological corporation is a good attempt. And public organizations or institutions are taking lead in such effort, and I think it's a great challenge. So far, the public institutions had the stance that we are representing humans. And I hope that it doesn't play as like nominal law showing that our enhanced awareness. We need to follow up with proper follow-up measures, and we need to show support because that the lawmakers and the public officials need to know that there are many people who are supporting such movement, and when these voices are heard, that they will realize that they are not only representing the human beings, and these human beings are also considering other species living on Earth together. Thank you. Because of the time constraint, that I think we have to ask the last question and move on to the next speech. Through the dolphins, aren't we reflective the desire of human beings? Because the corporation effort, the movement looks like we are making these laws for our own benefit. It looks like that we have many concerns about ecological corporation. I think you briefly touched upon, but can you share your insight? I think human desire is reflected in many ways. I think human desire has been focused on humans' benefits. However, for the benefit of the earth, then maybe we can use our desire for the good way. We can't only protect dolphins only by protecting dolphins in this process, especially in the Pacific bottlenose dolphins are related to the shore. So that is protecting not only the dolphins' rights, but the living beings around that area, and including, of course, the human beings. Thank you. So we were able to learn the in-depth concept about the ecological corporation. I'd like to thank Mr. Chang Soo-jin. Please give a big round of applause to Director Chang Soo-jin. Thank you.
감사합니다.
So let's move on to the second presentation. The second speaker is someone who works on the front lines where rights are urgently needed, Linda Sullivan. She has experience with Amnesty International and various human rights consortiums in Ireland, and now extends her work beyond human rights to include the right of non-human beings. She collaborates with the climate action networks such as Extinction Rebellion and Fridays for Future, and she is also working as a coordinator for communications at Yes to Life, No to Mining, a global network addressing climate justice. So just like the previous lecture, please leave questions on the Padlet before finishing the presentation. Now I'd like to introduce you to Ms. Linda Sullivan, who will show us some stories of Ireland. Please welcome her with a big hand.
Thank you for the welcome. Yeah, I'm delighted to be connecting with Korea again because I used to live in Korea for 3 years. I lived in Suncheon and also Busan. So yeah, I have many fond memories of my time in Korea, including a trip to Jeju. So yeah, I'm delighted to hear that such great work is going on to protect the dolphins. So yeah, I'm just going to share my presentation. So bear with me 1 second. Okay, let me know if you can see that. Okay. Yeah, I'll just go to the start. So now I can't see anybody else. So yeah, if you could just let me know, if someone could let me know if you can see that. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the rights of nature movement in Ireland. And I was delighted to see Thomas speaking earlier because he's played a very big role in our story. So yeah, I suppose the roots of the rights of nature movement here on this island go a way back, back before we give it that term. Like since capitalism has like intensified and its predation on nature did likewise, people have been standing up against it, like earth protecting. So the introduction of environmental protections, both at a state and regional level, so for us like the EU level, like give us hope, and communities were trying to use those regulations to protect their special places. But to quote Thomas, what the only thing that environmental regulations regulate are the environmentalists. So, to put it another way, they regulate environmental damage. They don't stop it. So many earth protectors across the island of Ireland were realizing this when they poured time and resources into challenging nature destroying projects in court, and found how time and time again, the rulings were going in favor of the developers. Yeah, so just a wee bit of background then on what threats we're facing across the island of Ireland. So a big one is extractivism. So just a bit of a explanation of what I mean by extractivism. So extractivism is high intensity export orientated extraction of common ecological goods in nature, rooted in colonialism and the notion that humans are separate from and superior to the rest of the living world. So the island of Ireland is a sacrifice zone for extractivism. So we have quarrying, so the extraction of rock and gravel and sand, which is just like proliferating across the whole island. And many of these quarrying projects are unregulated, but they're allowed to just continue and to continue to rip up nature. We also have mining. So we have the largest zinc mine in Europe, and we also have the largest bauxite processing plant, which is just both of these are like massive massive toxic waste accumulation that is an environmental disaster and human disaster waiting to happen. We also have 25% of the island, approximately 25% of the island is concession to mining companies. So there's a large gold mine proposed for the north, the Sperrin Mountains in the north of Ireland. And there's just, if that went ahead, it would just mean mining across, like it would open the doors to so much more. Yet we also, another form of extractivism is industrial agriculture. So we have, in the north, we have, so the kind of the island is split up and sacrificed for the needs of industrial agriculture. So in the south, it's mass beef and dairy production. And then in the north, it's poultry and pigs. So it's mostly for export. And it leaves behind animal waste and pollution, so such as like, ammonia, methane, and nitrous oxide, which is like greenhouse gases, hundreds of times more potent than CO2. So it's destroying the land. Like Ireland may seem green, people talk about the green fields, but really these green fields are biological or biodiversity deserts. So in the face of all that, we resist. We've been organizing, and we resist these threats. But we were doing it within the system. And back in 2019, we had a visit from Thomas, who you heard from, and Mary Margle, organised by Friends of the Earth Northern Ireland. And what what they showed us really is that like all our organising up to then using the environmental regulations was just funneling us into the box of allowable activism. So some activism that just permits the continuation of the damage. So what we really need to do is step out of that box and develop laws, particularly like local laws, that would protect nature and stop the destruction. So this was really mind-blowing for us. And so we spent there's there's a picture of Thomas and Mary with so we accompanied them around the different communities across the island, and you know, where communities were involved in some kind of resistance, and here you see this is the Spurn Mountains where they're resisting the gold mine. Yeah, so we spent the next couple of years like totally inspired by this, but not really knowing like where to go with it. We were talking about it, we were dreaming, but we couldn't really like see how exactly it could work in Ireland. So then in 2021, a number of elements came together. So we have a movement called the Environmental Gathering that brings together communities across the island of Ireland, and led by a fabulous woman, Mary McGuigan. So with Friends of the Earth, then James Orr from Friends of the Earth and Mary, we began meeting regularly and talking about how to realise the rights of nature in Ireland. And then in 2021, then we heard word came about what was happening in the Blue Mountains Council in Australia, and how they passed a motion declaring the rights of nature at their council area, and with that motion, like a promise to discover how rights of nature could be embedded there. So we took inspiration from that, and around that time as well, we had a number of activists within our movement who have been elected to local councils. So in Derry-in-Strabane, which is a council in the northwest, Councillor Maeve O'Neill, who was a People Before Profit councillor, agreed to take a motion supporting the rights of nature at that council area. And it was unanimously passed. And then a few weeks later, a neighbouring council, Fermanagh and Omagh, where the massive gold mine is wanting to be developed, we had another activist who became an independent councillor, Emmett McAleer, and he brought a similar motion that was similarly passed. And that started a wave across the island, and then north and south, and 5 councils in very quick succession passed motions. And here you can see them. One includes Belfast as well. Yeah, and then another important development, a couple of years later in 2023, we had a citizens' assembly on biodiversity loss, and it emerged from that recommendations to a government that the rights of the southern government, the south of Ireland, that rights of nature should be there should be a referendum to embed rights of nature in our constitution. So unfortunately, that hasn't progressed any further because of the political context here. The past 2 referendums failed, and it was felt that another referendum, no matter what it was on, would also fail. But it was definitely historic, and that door is still open. And hoping to be advanced in the future. So another rights of nature possibility. So we have our largest loch, Loch Ness, which is being poisoned by toxic algae, and that the main culprit is industrial agriculture. But also there's other problems with the loch as well. including the fact that it's still owned by an aristocrat, an English aristocrat, well, like owned in inverted commas because they claim to own it. From the time of colonization. And basically this, the Earl of Shaftesbury, gets royalties from the sand dredging, the sand mining that's happening, and that's tearing up the bed of the loch. So there are rights of nature, like possibilities there, but without ownership, like without while the ownership is still in the hands of the Earl, it's hard to see a way forward. But yeah, there's also currently a citizens' assembly being planned for the citizens to decide what happens to the loch. And alongside of that, communities are taking it into their own hands to declare rights of communities and rights of nature. So this is a declaration that you see from the Sperrin Mountains, where the people of the Sperrins assert the rights of the ecosystems and the rights of the Sperrins to thrive in the face of these mining threats. And then alongside that, we've been developing a lot of popular education. So we produced 2 films about the rights of nature concept on the island and also the movement. Maybe I could share the links for those after. We produced a lot of resources as well, like flyers and information leaflets and all that. And basically just the conversations continue. And the movement is now deeply embedded, or the concept of rights of nature is deeply embedded in our psyche, like in our activism, in our hope for the future. And we're inspired by what's happening around the world. I'm part of the Yes to Life No to Mining network, which is a global solidarity network of communities resisting mining. And we were recently with our partners in Ecuador, where the first rights of nature development in the Ecuadorian constitution led to this global tide. But that was under threat because the right-wing government is trying to take away those rights like community rights and rights of nature rights. But there was a vote a few days ago, and the population overwhelmingly decided that they don't want to take away, they don't want to go back. That these rights of nature provisions in the Constitution is what makes them who they are, and it has been used to protect the Los Angeles forest and another case in Yurimaguas as well. So and then there's cases across the world that we continue to be inspired by. The Zapatistas from Mexico, indigenous peoples from Mexico, came to visit and show their support as well for our movement. We also had visits from activists. This activist is from Zambia. You can see him standing there beside the public Declaration of Rights of Nature of the Sperrins. So I suppose we're thinking of the road ahead. We haven't managed yet to embed rights of nature in our laws, either at a local or national level. But we continue to try. It's a challenge, and we continue to search for ways of doing that because these are our special places that we need to protect. And they're only coming under more and more stress and more threats. And I suppose as well, a challenge is to find the space. We see rights of nature as like a long-term protection for nature, but people are caught up in firefighting the threats at the door. And maybe there's it's hard to find the space to develop, or to find a way to embed the rights of nature into our laws. But it's deeply important because as a great activist and campaigner, Fidelma O'Kane from the Sperrin says, we don't want our grandchildren to have to be doing this, day in, day out. protecting like campaigning and organizing and protecting the sparrows from these threats. So yeah, I'll stop there. That's kind of what I wanted to share, but happy to answer any questions.
네, 뜨겁고도 따뜻한 아일랜드의 사례를 들은 것
Thank you very much for thank you for you to share some the developments in islands. Many of the activities that you are having in islands is well connected with the ones here in Korea and around the world. I think it is very encouraging to hear that you have the civic council around the rights of nature. So that's something we can learn from you. We can communicate with it a little further. How do you like it? I'd like to open the floor for the questions and answers. And we'd like to ask a question to Linda Sullivan, and these are the questions from the participants. So, 5 local councils have passed the resolution. What actual changes have taken place as a result? Can you answer?
Yeah, so I suppose that's where we were very excited that these motions were being passed, but we didn't really have like a concrete plan for after. Like we were hoping that the council themselves would lead a process for the population and to discuss like how we embed rights of nature, but that didn't happen. And what councils have like done is either ignore it or try to slot the concept into what was already happening, so saying that like, oh, but we have these biodiversity plans, like rights of nature is in there, but so they weren't really getting the concept that we need to have legally binding local laws that embeds nature's rights. So where it all started in Derry, they have been continuing to push and to continue to find ways to realise the rights of nature. So yeah, they're making advancements with the local council, and it's more like there's education needed. Like councils need to be educated on actually what we do mean by rights of nature and what we are asking for. So that process is ongoing. There has been the Environmental Justice Network Ireland has developed like guides for how you could achieve more councils declaring motions, but also like what could happen after that. So yeah, we I think if we would do it again, we would have a more solid plan for after the motion's passed and when the momentum is built, but it's not lost, and we continue to try like to find the crack where the light gets in. So definitely more work needs to be done.
네, 방금 말씀해 주신 것처럼 정말
Thank you. As you mentioned, so there's a lot for us to go here in Korea and in islands. You briefly talk about education or raising the awareness. We have some other questions related to that. How are you explaining the concept of rights of nature to residents? How are you engaging with them?
Yeah, so the concept that rights of nature embodies is the concept that is very old. Like it's that nature is alive, that we are part of nature, and that nature needs protection from these threats. So this is something that has been in the Irish culture for a long time. The Irish language is deeply connected to nature, and some of it can be translated into English, so that like love of nature and connection to nature has been part of our culture for a long time. But the concept of giving nature rights is kind of like it just puts a new language around it, a language that is needed in our current context. So it's not introducing something completely new. It's what was always there. It's just giving it a new framework. And then just thinking as well in terms of rights, like women were considered property, enslaved people were considered property, and because of like movements of people, that is now changed, and women like have rights. They're people aren't enslaved. So it's like we need to do the same for nature. We need to like recognize that nature has rights. We're not giving nature rights, like we're recognizing that nature has rights. And because of all the threats that we're faced with, we need to afford nature that more substantial protection. So we need to realign our laws to suit or to fit with our current reality, and they're currently not doing that.
네, 정말 의미 있는 강연을 들은 거.
All right, that is very significant. Thank you very much. Thank you for showing us what is the recent developments in your country islands. I hope all the audiences here in Korea be interested in the developments in islands. Thank you, Linda Sullivan, for sharing your story. We'd like to wrap it up with giving you a big hand.
네,
Thank you very much.
다음
Thank you.
강연을 하기 전에
And before we move on, we have a pre-event activity that we previously introduced during registration. Have you all taken part in our collaborative Rights of Nature map?
사진과 글로 남겨주시길 요청드렸는데
You're invited to choose a place or being you believe deserves rights and to share your message through photos and text. And now let's take a moment to share a few stories submitted about beings in need of rights.
김천시 수도산을 지정하고 싶다고 한 윤미래
And Ms. Yoon Mire said that she wants to recognize, designate Sudo Mountain in Kimcheon City. Sudosan is home for many animals and trees. But we need to remember that there are living beings living there as a habitat. They can't speak human language, but they have rights to flourish. So we have to think about how we can give rights to them. So Suda Mountain, it also has great connection with the restored bear. So I hope that the Sudo Mountain can be designated or respected for its rights. And EG1 said that the elephants in Jeju have to be respected for its rights. That they perform 4 times a day, that they perform like circus. They must have been separated from their families, and then they are separated, and then they are now living far from their homes. I hope that they can go back home and then find their families. It's more like a fairy tale. I understand it's almost impossible. Then we'd like to maybe shoot more good time for those elephants. Elephants are supposed to live in the warm environment, but they are now going through harsh winter environment in Korea. I didn't realize that there are elephants in Jeju. So wild animals are used for the entertainment for human beings. And there are many discussions going on in Korea about using animals as entertainment. We can maybe think about giving sanctuary so that elephants can live in Korea much better than in their current environment. So we need to continue to pay attention to the environment where elephants live. So now we have read those texts. And I'd like to know more about your thoughts. So the event hasn't finished yet, so please share your stories. And for those who leave your thoughts that we'd like to give gifts. So we have prepared books for you. These are related to the rights of nature. And Ms. Jang Soo-jin's book and Mr. Hwang Jun-seo's books are ready for you. So we're going to select 15 participants to receive a gift. Do you know what May 22nd? 22nd? It's the day of biodiversity. And the people who are participating in this event walked on all fours on the asphalt in the front of Gwanghwamun, and carrying the message that it's time for humans to coexist with all the relationships surrounding us. This performance, directed by An Young-jun, former rehearsal director of the Korea National Contemporary Dance Company, has been held for the second year, joined by 5 professional dancers. So they show the movements of goats, of 설악산, the spoonbills of 새만금, the finless purpose of 거덕도. So, in this place where countless people rush past, the movements caught their steps. So these calm but strong movements must have created cracks in the our mindset. So I'm wondering if you are ready to walk on all your fours. Let's watch a video.
네, 비인간 생명이 되어 몸짓을
So the peoples are showing their gestures, mimicking the non-human beings. How do you like it? So would you please share your thoughts about the video in the Kakao chat room? I sincerely ask all of you to leave a message. And while you are working on it, I would like to share that I was there in the video. Please imagine what animal I am kind of acting out. So please bear that in mind while you are living your thoughts. And with all that things in your mind, I recommend you to watch this video once again. So this is the second anniversary for us to have this performance to kind of mimicking the behavior of animals. I was in the Ganghamun Square to walk on 4 feet. That was very special experience for me. I'm pretty sure all of you are leaving some comments on the Kakao chat room, and some are saying that I'm about to crying, and they are reminded about Tetsu Jet. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but remembering the moments that I put 4 feet on the screen on the street is something like the people who doesn't have arms and legs. You know, whenever I just see the video, I am overwhelmed. We are doing the Green Conference and also as well as such kind of performances. So I sincerely ask you to show your interest and support for all the activities that we are doing at the Green Korea United. And people are saying that it's touching to see many youths are participating in, and it is really touching that we are protecting each other. Actually, not only the human beings, for all non-human beings should live together in this world. That is our ultimate goal to be here to share our thoughts and experiences. Please keep leaving your comment in the Kakao chat room. And the Green Conference, let's move on to the second part. And the two more presentations is waiting for you.
So the third speaker is activist and political scientist, Secretary General Natalie Green from GARN. Natalie Green is a renowned environmental activist from Ecuador and serves as a global director of GARN. She is an activist and a political scientist in Ecuador. So with a strong background in defending indigenous rights and advancing climate crisis initiatives, she has continuously built collaborative relationships among community scientists. She advocates not only for structural change, but also for cultural and ethical transformation to redefine the relationship between humanity and the earth. And if you have questions, please upload your questions on the Padlet. Then we can have a Q&A session after the presentation. So now let's welcome Ms. Natalia.
Thank you, everybody, and I hope you're having a good night. It's very early for me in Ecuador. It's 6:30 in the morning in Ecuador, and it's my delight to be here with you all today. I want to thank you because bringing the voice of the rights of nature to Korea is a real pleasure. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here. Can you please confirm if you can see it? Maybe with a thumbs up, someone? Okay, perfect. Well, thank you very much. As I was saying, I'm from Ecuador. My name is Natalia Green. I'm the director of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. I am also the secretariat for the International Rights of Nature Tribunal. And I've been delighted to be working with the Rights of Nature idea. Since very early, I've been working with the Rights of Nature for the past 17 years. And it's been my pleasure to understand that this is not just an idea or a job. You know, this doesn't really seem or look like a job for me. This is a transformation. This is a paradigm shifter. This is the reason why that gives me hope in life. And I hope that I can transmit that to you all today. So something that I really like when when I give talks about the rights of nature is to use this phrase from Ilya Pregonini. And it says, when a system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to shift the entire system. And why do I see this and understand this as a real thing happening? Is that we don't need to change the whole system tomorrow. We don't need to convince absolutely everybody about this idea of the rights of nature, about this transformation with the earth. We need to change enough people so we can become these islands of coherence in a sea of chaos. This is what we need to do, and I truly believe this is what's happening with the rights of nature movement. And believe me, I've been working with the rights of nature for 17 years, and it always gives me hope when I see other countries and other movements and other people around the world working for this. And I'm so delighted to see that you are working with the rights of nature in Korea. That gives me hope that we're definitely going in the right direction, and we are indeed creating these islands of coherence. So why rights of nature? Well, because rights of environmental law has not been enough. Environmental law only tells you how many times you can hit your slave, how many times you can, how much you can pollute the water, how much mercury you can put into the water, how much pollutants you can put into the water. It's telling you how much you can hit your slave. The environmental law is not telling you that you need to treat nature differently. It's only telling you how much you can continue polluting and mistreating nature. So the rights of nature deserves to be a new paradigm, because you need to treat nature, understand that nature is indeed a subject of rights, and that we need to change how we relate to nature, because we are nature protecting itself. And that is the big difference. So of course nature has rights. How can a corporation have rights if it's an entity that doesn't even exist? When nature is alive, when nature gives us light, oxygen, food, when nature, we know that nature is alive. You were talking and mentioning the animals. We know that nature is alive, not only from the animals that we see, but even to the rocks and the mountains that we feel and that are part and around us. So it's really interesting, because when we started the Rights of Nature movement in 2010, actually right now is our 15-year anniversary, we used this quote from Victor Hugo that said, "There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come." And this was 2008 and 2010. This was very early in the movement, and really it was something that was starting to pick up, but it wasn't so strong. I see that now it is definitely an idea whose time has come. It's something powerful that is not going to be able to stop us. In 2018, we gathered around in this room with everybody who was working with the rights of nature. All of the people that are working with the rights of nature, including you all, wouldn't fit in one room anymore, because this movement has grown exponentially. And it has grown so much because it makes sense. It makes sense as an emerging, powerful global movement that is transforming human consciousness, redesigning failing consulting economic and social structures, and creating a framework to live in harmony with nature, grounded in the recognition that nature has rights and that Mother Earth has rights. This is a picture that I found very recently, and this is a picture of me in our constitution in 2008. So I wanted to share that with you all, because as Linda was saying in the last presentation, this constitution of 2008 was ratified this last Sunday. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it. But I want to say that in the constitutional process in 2008, we were able to identify and to recognize that nature has inherent rights, and that those need to be recognized in the highest legal tool that we have, and that is our constitution. So Ecuador in 2008 indeed recognized that nature is not an object, that nature is not a resource, that nature is a source of life, that nature is a subject that needs to be respected as a legal entity. And this caused a real big global movement. And you can see then that in 2010, there was a conference of the World Conference for People for Climate Change and the Rights of Mother Earth that was held in Bolivia. We then created the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature in 2010. And we are celebrating, as I said, our 15-year anniversary of a movement that has grown now to 40 countries. So I invite you to see this animation now, where you can see that there was a little town in the US called Tamarcuaburo that passed an ordinance, but it was thanks to Ecuador that passed the constitutional amendment in 2008 that the world, as you see, is starting to come in colors. Come in colors with countries giving rights of nature. We have 2 countries that now have legal laws, national laws, one in Panama and in Bolivia, national laws that have been amazing, especially in countries like Panama that are really leading the way. Panama right now, I just came back from Brazil, from COP, is a country that is doing a nature's pledge for the rights of nature, is a country that has been able to stop a large open pit mine in the country, has been able to pass a legislation for turtles, and so on, only since it was able to incorporate the rights of nature in a national law in 2022. We have a really growing movement on the rights of nature, especially regarding ecosystems and rivers. But this movement has grown much and much more, arriving now to 40 countries that have advanced the rights of nature. 22 have legal advancements. I mean legal advancements when I say a national law, an ordinance, a recognition of an ecosystem like a river. And this is what I mean with national legal advances. And 18 have projects regarding like the rights of Antarctica, for example, projects regarding the conversations and the changes in Italy, for example, for the Venice Lagoon and so forth. You can see this in very different types of things, because in 2008, when we were researching about the rights of nature for our constitution, there were only 5 articles that we found on the rights of nature. One was Christopher Stone's famous article, Should Trees Have Standings? But there were only 5 things that were talking about the rights of nature, like Cormac Cullinan's book. Now, if you go to Google Scholar, you will find more than 25,000 articles written about the rights of nature. The growth of this movement has been exponential, so I'm showing this map for those of you interested in the more academic side. But if you're interested in the more activist side, you can also look at the Eco-Jurisprudence Monitor, where you'll find more than 500 initiatives that are happening around the world around the rights of nature. You'll find here initiatives that have you'll find documents and the documentation that will allow you to investigate how there's a growing movement for the rights of nature. And I like to see this, if you see my first quote of Ira Pregonini, as these islands of coherence, or as an acupuncture that we're doing to a world that is sick, a world that we know is reaching the tipping point. I came back from Brazil and our scientists are telling us that we don't have more time, that we are losing very, very key time to change the direction where we're driving the world. And this, for me, is an acupuncture that we're doing to a world that is hurting. So the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature is born really as a network, not as an organization, but as a network that I actually invite you all to join. And it's a network of organizations, individuals that we are organized around hubs. So we have regional and thematic hubs, regional in Europe, Africa, Latin America, North America, and also the Asia Pacific. So I really encourage you, and I know that Gina from Korea has been very active with the Asia Pacific hub, and I of course encourage you all to become part of this hub. But we also have thematic hubs. The legal, the academic, and the youth hub are ways to get together people that are having their same interests, like they're both all in academic, all lawyers, or all youth that are really trying to promote and push the rights of nature movement and trying to dialogue in their own languages to understand how you can use this tool to really take this to your own territories, not only to other countries, but to your cities, to your local ordinances, to change legislation to incorporate the rights of nature. We've also been able to organize our international rights of nature tribunals that are a space to really listen to the voice of nature, but also to the voice of nature defenders. We've been able to do this around the world, and our goal right now is to really bring this voice also to Asia Pacific and Africa. As I was mentioning, the rights of rivers has been a really amazing way of growing this movement. Here you'll see quite a bit of names of rivers that have rights. If you haven't seen this yet, I will really advise you to read this book from Robert McFarland, Is a River Alive? That also talks about this recognition of the rights of rivers. And it's amazing how much people get engaged with their own rivers, with their own water systems. the river in my city, the Machanga River, has been granted rights last year. In Europe, the first ecosystem with rights, the Mar Menor, is an ecosystem that is really driving the movement in Europe. Small countries, small initiatives like this one from Mariluz Cañaquiri in the Marañón River, it has really led Peru to have the first rights of nature case led by indigenous women. And Mariluz, the person that you're looking at this picture, was the recipient of the Goldman Prize this year, 2025. Last year, it was Maria Teresa Vicente that was the promoter of the initiative in Spain. And as you can see, these are initiatives that are really making sense and that are being awarded around the world. I was recently in Abu Dhabi, where the IUCN granted in the award ceremony for the World Policy Award, 7 out of the 10 initiatives that were awarded were regarding the rights of nature. So this is a moment that is happening. It's no longer an idea that we are sharing, it's an initiative and it's a movement that is happening around the world. And here what I'm bringing is hopefully some good news and some encouragement and some hope about how we can all make this happen. These 2 frogs that you're looking at right now are 2 frogs that we found in Intag. These frogs were living in one of the 2 waterfalls called the Twin Waterfalls. One of them was polluted thanks to mining. The other one was clean. And we found this frog right here that was called Rana arlequinosicuda. This frog was considered extinct and was rediscovered. However, this one was found. For experts in frogs, this is like a dinosaur, they say. It's a really rare frog that didn't have a name. It was a new frog. And we called it, with the help of many people like Leonardo DiCaprio and others, this frog was called the resistance frog. And as little as you see it right here, this frog right here was able to stop the second largest mining company in the world, Codelco, from entering its territory. This is a story that for me gives me lots of hope. Look at this little frog that went to court and won the case against a mining company. So these things can happen. Of course, this is an umbrella species for a beautiful and diverse ecosystem that deserves and has rights, and was able to impede the inclusion of the rights of nature, the mining in its territory. What we're doing now is that we're aiming for big. The rights of nature movement has grown. The rights of nature movement is not only an idea, it's something that is happening. And we came back from Brazil calling for the Declaration for the Rights of the Amazon. This is something important because we're not only aiming for small ecosystems, we're thinking and understanding that big biomes like the Amazon are reaching its tipping point, and it's time for us to recognize that the Amazon has rights and that we need to look at a new governance system for important ecosystems and biomes like the Amazon. We're doing something very similar to the rights of Antarctica. We need to be giving a voice to Antarctica, this ecosystem that is this silent ecosystem down in the south, this ecosystem that is really fighting against climate change and is so key for the stability of the weather. We're giving a voice to Antarctica, and that is why on December 1st, so in a couple of weeks, we're going to be launching the Declaration for the Rights of Antarctica, and I invite you all to join this initiative as well. And I want to use my last minutes to share that we were just in Brazil, and we had a beautiful gathering. I'm showing you pictures right now of a congregation and a celebration of our 15-year anniversary, where people from around the world, indigenous people, you see here the Maori that were able to give the rights to the Wanganui River. The Wanganui River is a river that is really sacred for the Maori. The Maori say, "I am the river is me." This was out of an arrangement with the government of New Zealand. They said the river does not belong to you or to us. The river has its own personhood. So the river Wanganui has its own rights, and the guardians of the Wanganui River are the Maoris that you see net right here. We were also able to bring people together from Africa, from Brazil, from India, from all over the world, to be able to celebrate the Rights of Nature anniversary of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. You'll see here the picture of like everybody who was in the gathering, planning ahead of what's coming up for the movement, this movement that is a growing movement for the rights of nature, understanding that it's important to change a paradigm. It's important to waking up to the fact that laws need to change. And I'm really happy to see that you're not only thinking with a video of changing the laws, but also recognizing that animals have rights. Ecuador was able to recognize the rights of the Estrellita case and expand the rights of nature and ecosystems to the rights of animals. So that is all incorporated, and where we're looking up right now is for the rights of nature. And I want to end up by saying what happened this Sunday that was extremely important. This Sunday, the president of Ecuador wanted to call for a new constitution. The president of Ecuador was calling for a referendum, a national referendum. Elections in Ecuador are mandatory, and we all had to come and vote in order to say yes or no to a new constitution. We were very sure that the government had very good chances of voting. He has a lot of power, a lot of resources, and the whole country of Ecuador had to vote for 4 questions, but especially the question number 4 was risking us to go again and rewrite a new constitution, a constitution that the government of Ecuador really wants to promote extractivism, wants to continue doing big-scale mining and oil development in the Amazon, and we more than 65% of the country told the government, no, we do not want to change our constitution, and the rights of nature were ratified this last Sunday. I'm talking about this because this has been extremely important. This has allowed us to see that there is support for the rights of nature movement around the world. The rights of nature movement is not only happening in Ecuador and in Latin America, as you know, it's happening around the world. And we were able to listen to voices from everywhere in the world saying, Ecuador, do not go back. Do not go back and on all the rights that you have guaranteed, not only for the rights of nature, but also for the collective rights. And that is how the rights of nature were ratified this Sunday. And that is something that I really wanted to thank everybody who was supporting this initiative and this voting that was, of course, in the hands of Ecuadorians, but it was an initiative and a vote that is affecting the whole world. So I'm going to end here just by saying that, of course, there's an urgent need to recognize nature rights and to reshape our relationship with the planet. This is something that we need, and as I was saying, we need to keep on formulating and strengthening these islands of coherence that bring us together and that can really allow us to change a system that is urgently needed to change, a system, a sea of chaos where we're living at. And it's not small to say that all the voices that you've listening in these conferences, Ireland, the voices that you're hearing from Korea and from Ecuador, we're all coming together, because when I see the negotiation is happening in Brazil, I see that the governments are not doing enough to change a system that is really taking us to a crisis, a polycrisis, a crisis not only for climate and biodiversity, a crisis that is affecting us all, an ethical crisis. Because if we don't understand that nature is alive and that we need to change our systems to incorporate and understand that nature has to be recognized for its rights, then we have an ethical crisis that we also need to take in consideration. So I'm leaving here also some resources, our GARN website, and I invite you to become a member of GARN, the Rights of Nature Tribunal website. That is also something that I was sharing we want to be doing soon enough in the Asia-Pacific region. And also, for those of you who speak Spanish, the website that we have for the Ecuadorian cases, where we have more than 70 cases advancing the rights of nature. So I'm going to stop sharing there so I can hear from you. I know my time is up, and I would love to listen if you have some questions for me. And thank you so much for giving a voice to nature in Korea.
네, 감사합니다. 저도 사실
Thank you so much.
헌법 개정 움직임에서 과거로 돌아가지 말자.
Yes, I was also desperate to hear that you don't go back to the past. So it's really happy to hear
We were really happy to hear that the Ecuador case, you won the vote and you didn't go back to the past. So also in Korea, it's important that we restore the rights of four rivers in Korea. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to ask a question. The first question is about you are working as a global director. The rights of nature movement has taken a stronger root in North and South America rather than in Africa or Asia where humanity originated. Could you share why this trend has developed this way?
Well, I think that it has developed in a very nice way. Let me change that. Okay. It has developed, especially in Latin America, because we have quite a strong indigenous population. I feel that the fact that not only Ecuador, but all the Andes have all this indigenous population and this idea of the Pachamama, Mother Earth, and also the rest of the country in Latin America, Brazil in particular, with such a big indigenous population, has really these roots and this understanding of nature being our mother. So the Rights of Nature movement is not something that we came up in 2008. It's something that comes from indigenous worldview and is translated into the modern world and the modern legislations on recognizing that nature needs to have rights in modern legislations. However, this is an idea that is coming from indigenous people. However, there are indigenous people all over the world. So I think that this resonates and gets to be understood in many parts of the world. We were very lucky to be able to change our constitution back in 2008 and make sure that not only were we incorporating and translating this concept into the constitution, but also making it more democratic because we were incorporating the rights of the voice of indigenous people and their worldview into our constitution. However, this can happen all over the world, either if you have indigenous population or not. If you see what happened in Spain with Mar Menor, it came out of a really scientific perspective of what was going on with Mar Menor. Mar Menor had a real case of ecocide in Mar Menor, and by demonstrating that there was ecocide in Mar Menor, they were able to change and to tell the government of Murcia that there was an urgent need to recognize the rights of Mar Menor. So this can happen all over the world, and I'm really hopeful that people from around the world have not lost their relationship to nature, have not lost this understanding that we are nature, that we are sons and daughters of the earth. And this awakening is happening in many parts of the world. So yes, indeed, as much as it has happened a lot in South America, it is happening around the world. And because we are all understanding that if we don't change how we relate to nature, if we don't understand that nature is not only there, out there, very far in the Amazon, but it's happening around our cities, in our and the rivers that you're saying, those four rivers that need to be recognized as rights-bearing entities. If we don't recognize that we need to change how we relate to nature, that what happens to that river happens to you, if we don't change that, then we don't have a hope for humanity. So that is why this global movement, not only in South America, it started strongly in South America, but I hope and I know that it's going to happen around the world.
네, 마지막 질문을 좀 드려볼까 하는데요. 처음
Now, I want to ask you a question about the Pachamama.
자연의 권리를 인정한다라는 말에서 끝나는
So nature has rights, but not only recognize that you recognize the cycle and regeneration of the nature. And it was impressive that you understand the harmony with nature. Recently, the president of Ecuador has attempted to remove the rights of nature from the constitutions, and you share the results. So I want to know about the current public sentiment after the vote. What is the public sentiment?
Thank you for that question. So one thing you mentioned about regeneration, and I think that that's really interesting because we are not only hoping to avoid damage. The rights of nature really wants to prevent damage. So that is interesting because it's not only like environmental law, it's just like trying to do something when the damage is done. So we want to prevent the damage, but we also want to regenerate whatever has been impacted. And we have a lot to do about that in Ecuador. So the sentiment right now in Ecuador is about celebration. We didn't know that we could win. The campaign that we were promoting was a very organic and diverse and cheap campaign because we were doing it with our own resources, not with the resources of the second largest capital in the country that comes from the president's family. And he really wanted to change the constitution to be able to incorporate and to promote mining and oil development and extractivism. So the sentiment right now that we have in Ecuador is a sentiment of celebration. Not only in Ecuador, but the whole world should be celebrating because we should understand that the power of people is bigger than the power of capital, that we are more and we're more together, that we cannot allow our democracy to be taken away from us, that we cannot allow dictatorships and authoritarian governments to be taking away our rights. And I say that because that is something that we see happening in the US and we see happening in Ecuador and we see happening in many countries in the world. And that is something that we need to understand, that the power of people is really important. And that is why the rights of nature is not only a small movement, it's not a conservation tool. We're not making or allowing more national parks to develop. We want to change how we relate to nature. And that is something that we can all do together. And the sentiment now is a sentiment of celebration because we can see that together we can do amazing things, like winning this campaign that it was almost thought to be impossible.
Yes, it was such a wonderful inspiration. Ecuador and Korea are connected thanks to Natalia. Thank you so much. And we are congratulating you on the keeping the Constitution. Thank you so much. Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So this will be the last lecture. Do you remember the Tan oil spill? Actually, that was the inspiration for this speaker to join the Green Korea United, and he's still actively working for this organization. And Chun Seok Hwang will deliver the presentation. And he's currently conducting research at the Center for Sustainable Future at the University of Hamburg, while participating in peace and ecological justice movements across various countries. And he has continued to volunteer and stay engaged ever since for the Taean and ocean. Throughout the rights of nature discourse, he contributes to moving beyond the human-centered thinking and advancing sustainable peace. So please welcome researcher Hwang Jun-sung. He is sitting right next to me. Very happy to see you all. Well, he's joining us in our studio, and he will talk about the social imagination inspired by the rights of nature. The floor is yours.
감사합니다.
Very happy to see you all. I am Junso Hwang, just as introduced. Well, many other speakers shared very meaningful cases, so based on that, I'd like to talk about how the rights of nature will be spread to Korea and beyond, and what is the possibility for the nature rights. So that is my perspective to prepare this presentation. So I just put the title, The Rights of Nature and Social Imagination. Well, what is the social imaginations? There are so many identity and occupations and cultural backgrounds, and many different people are living together in our society. They have common ideal and common value, but at the same time, they are living in the same system, and they considered as a one big group, or sometimes they are divided into subgroups. And from the perspective, we can think about the social imagination. Well, there are some values and orders that strengthen the social cohesion, but at the same time, social imaginations may bring some changes to our conventional norms. That's how social imaginations have been working. But at the same time, there are many different values in our society, like psychological and philosophical and the physical assets. Out of many values, what values should be pursued while some should be reduced? So to establish the relationship between the values are largely based on social imagination. To evaluate all different values, we can educate what is right from the wrong, so sometimes it serves as a standard or criteria. So the rights of nature can be a part of implementation of social imaginations. There are so many different forms inside the social imaginations. So sometimes such kind of imaginations can make can and have been making a great contribution to the pollution or damages of environment. As you can see in the screen, human beings seem to occupy all nature and ecosystem. That's right. So actually, the male uh, have been deciding everything when it comes to living this world, and the male has become the dominating role so for quite a long time, and that has maintained for quite a long. And under such a structure, some other human beings and the non-human beings have been kind of manipulated or exploited. As a result of that, we are facing climate crisis. It even threats the very survival of human beings. But still, we believe human can continue to occupy and govern and control the nature. As a part of the result of such kind of attitude is that those who attempt to control nature end up being controlled themselves. For example, the reason why people decided to exploitation or development, they want to secure safety from threat or secure some resources or assets from the resource. But as a result of such kind of decision, we are not free from threat or danger. We have to live among or inside the danger and threats. So there is the backgrounds and the context. So the system and institution should be changed, and that requires new imagination. And at the same time, the right of nature or narrowing down the legal entity or the legal humanhood is one tool for us to trigger new imagination. The legal personhood is a part of the system. The legal personhood means that we are giving some kind of entity or the agency for things that is not human, as if they are human. So the one good example is a corporate. We call them the legal entity or corporated entity. So the law and the legal entity is nothing new. However, it can goes beyond the legal entity of a corporation. It can be given to some other creatures who have been living together with the human beings on Earth. So that brought a lot of controversies. Some other speaker talked briefly, not only the flora and fauna, the machines can be the subject to have a legal entity. And today we are talking about rights of the nature, so I'd like to focus on that. Ms. Natalie Green talks about the current status of Earth's Earth's personhood or ecological, the legal entity. That means we are recognizing the legal entity for everything in nature. And it also recognizes the rights and the ownership of predecessor. And we also recognize their relationship with the land. So it also includes alternative systems and legal framework. And so many different activities and movements have been emerging. And here in Korea, before we are commonly using the right of nature, we have been talking and working on this area. And I will get back to that point a little later. In the meantime, New Zealand and Ecuador are leading the discourse of the right of nature, and they are considered as two great examples in terms of the rights of nature. So let's look into these two cases a little further. In New Zealand, Manganui River and this year, Taranaki Mountain, the three areas or three ecosystems are recognized to have a legal personhood. They themselves are independent legal entity. It doesn't be owned by somebody else or some other object. So as the social imagination has become a part of our legal system and becoming one fabric of norms, then people just think a little further because they always think about the next. But last year in New Zealand, there is a new government. And of course, the former governments in New Zealand recognize the legal entity or legal personhood of nature, but at the same time, they revised the law to give more leeway for the developers to carry out their project. But as they have a new government in New Zealand, they revised the Natural Resource Protection Act, and they separate that into Urban Development Act and Development Planning Act. So the legal foundation of legal rights in New Zealand was dismantled. And because of such kind of movements of the government, all the things they have achieved in terms of right to nature and the right to relations between ownership and the predecessors have been weakened. So many civic groups and citizens are working against to protect such long-term values. And such kind of grassroots movement try to deliver the messages that the existing system they have achieved is more beneficial than the new ones. I'd like to briefly talk about Ecuador. The president of Ecuador, Noboa, got a lot of sponsorship from the mining companies, and he himself is a part of the Jeju families. And since he was elected, he abolished the Ministry of Environment, and he is giving a lot of license of mining to many different countries. And he's kind of bring the development his predecessor have achieved backward. However, very recently, luckily, there was a referendum, and the people say no to his movement or his direction. So we believe there might be a big break on his direction or his the aggressive directions. So this is the headlines of Ecuador, but it becomes global news, and people really hail to hear people say no to the referendum. And people can have a new imagination that's the implications and power of the right to nature. And all the discourses about the right to nature is largely limited to the legal system. And when it comes to the implementation, it's largely reduced to legal lawsuit. But at the same time, as we are giving the legal personhood to the nature, then when there is a lawsuit, then rivers and animals should go to the court to sue against the governments. But they can also play as a political agency. So regarding all different political issues, they have every right to take part in decision making. In 1992, that's a milestone year for the environmental movement. In 1972, in Stockholm, we had the UN Environmental General Assembly, and there that was the first to declare that humans have the right to enjoy the clean environment. 50 years later, in 2022, UN General Assembly once again declared that humans should have the right to enjoy the environment. That was reaffirmed. But now, the right of environment is for human. Is the right of environment means human beings can enjoy the clean nature, but the right to nature means the nature itself should be respected as it is, and they are having the legal personhood to take part in the social life. So the right of environment and the right of nature are contradictory, but it's a little different. So within certain framework of constitution or domestic law or local law, the right to nature has been included in part, But at the same time, as a part of the earth, we have to protect and enhance the right to nature. Then we have to make some efforts at the international level. So as Ms. Natalia Green mentioned briefly before, and she said some the international the right to nature court movement, and there is another movement in the political circle. So under the UN, there is the Right to Nature Council and the world's later right to call the Right to Nature Council. And actually Bolivia 2010, they declare the World Mother's Earth Rights Declaration that was adopted by the UN, and the UN has been safeguarding the right to nature in part. So we can say the global countries have agreed on certain things about the right to nature, but it has made significant developments. Let's come back to Korea to talk to see the right to nature. Well, the nature means ecosystem, a certain ecosystem or certain animal, just like one of our speaker deals with the dolphin. So whether it is an ecosystem or a species, if that is recognized to have a legal personhood, then the human being who has the right can deprive other human beings with rights of their rights. If they recognize each other's rights, then they have to have a new relationship. So that's what we need to think about. So the right to nature have shouldn't be considered as a legal meaning or the institutional implications, but it should be integrated and incorporated into our daily lives. So it should be translated into a certain criteria or social norm for us to act out in our daily lives. As working as an environmental activist here in Korea, many are saying that it's really difficult to change something in the interest of the environment. Actually, if we just keep doing what we are doing, then we are violating the basic rights of a future generation. Actually, the future generations are not being born yet, but our discourse of human rights has been expanded. So the current generations are responsible to the future generation. We are responsible not to violate the future generations' rights. So one of the questions was that if the right to nature is reflecting the desire of human beings, I agree with that. It can be the desire and needs of human beings, but what's important from the social imagination's perspective is that how we can maintain and spread the appropriate and proper social imagination in our society. Out of many discourse, some are saying that the human beings, it's not right for human being only to claim their rights. So they even say that we shouldn't abolish human rights itself. We may go with such a claim, but they may generate a side effect to kind of neglect or disrespect all the achievements human rights activists movement's efforts. So here in Korea, the nature rights movement is not familiar because there are many lawsuits to protect certain species, and the species are not human. And that lawsuit has been titled as that specific animals or species. And we have in-depth and enough discussions here in Korea, and that is well in line with the international discourse. So as we continue to discourse and discussion about this topic in this way, we have to think about what relationship human beings should make with nature. And the ecosystem and species who is recognized to have legal personhood, instead of worrying about to damage them, we have to think first what relationship we can build with them and how we're gonna act out to protect and preserve their rights. Last but not least, I want to explain why I highlight the relationship. I went to New Zealand and went to some other places which has a very strong the nature rights movements. Still, animals and plants are dying out. Some are dying due to roadkill, and but still they are very active to carry out the right of nature movements. But they are usually focused on ecosystem like a river, mountains, or wild animals, and the livestock hadn't been discussed to preserve and protect the right of nature. So that's the part we need to work on further. That is kind of a remaining task that we have to tackle. So we can imagine in a better way, and I think that will be the future of Korea. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's very interesting to hear that. And in the meantime, you are saying that you are saying, well, as you mentioned, as you mentioned, we need to expand our territory and landscape of imaginations. Because you are sitting right next to me, I can hear every single word. So let's share some questions. So I found your lecture very impressive. Human beings seem to carry two contrasting tendencies, one as destroyers of nature and cosmic orders, and another as those who reveal and illuminate the truth of life and existence within nature and the universe. How can we strengthen the latter tendency, the capacity to reveal the truth of nature and cosmic existence? In the context of the right of nature, how can we overcome the perception of nature as an object or entity separate from humans? It's a very in-depth question. I need 3 hours to give you the good answer. Well, just like dolphins at the Jeju, we are actively discussing how we're going to give a legal entity to the dolphins. Many doubt it, but once there is one gate is opened, you can just walk on that path to experience and experience many things, and that's a great opportunity for us to expand our way of thinking. And I think the role of education is essential. One of the characteristics in Korea, people are living in the apartment complexes, so the opportunity for children to experience the green area is very limited. But here in Korea, we have very big river like a Hangang River, so we are not far from nature, but psychologically, we have a long distance from the nature. That is unfortunate thing. But basically, the roles of the environmental movement is really important. The right of nature is something is not something that we can achieve forever. It is very realistic, and that's one thing we can deliver the story to the general public. And as a member of the Earth, we can explore a way to live with nature, not exploiting them. Thank you for your philosophical answer to the philosophical question. We're gonna find another opportunity to give you 3 hours or more to listen to the best answer. This is another the philosophical answer. If there is any content as a film or music, what kind of activity, what we have to work to excuse me, let me just put the question once again. To strengthen the roles of a human being to reveal the truths of the universe, what kind of action we have to take? I think this question is similar to the previous question. I am a person who thinks thoroughly and seriously about how our society will run better. And Environmental Act has been written to allow the development. But at the same time, it also incorporates how we minimize the damage or impact on the environment while developing. So in that context, the right of nature is a big challenge to the right or the environmental law. And there might be a lot of dilemmas and controversies, but we shouldn't stop our working whenever we face dilemma, but we can just see the positive thing to make it happen and to make it possible. On the past, there might be a lot of pessimistic the opinions, and there are some people who are kind of damaged or who are showing some losses due to such kind of changes, but I don't think we need to be afraid of such loss or threat. As I mentioned, when we are exercise the social imagination, some might be the negative to us, and we can work on our declaim. We can just persuade with confidence. Thank you. Persuade people with confidence. That's a good point. So we don't need to give up. We can just keep imagining. Thank you, researcher Huang. Please give him a big hand. Thank you very much. That's a wrap for your session.
So already 2.5 hours have passed. We were able to hear from 5 speakers. So through many cases, I'm sure that you have expanded your imaginations. So I want to ask you, what are the imaginations that you have about the rights of nature, and what kind of space or existence that you'd like to give rights of the nature? So please share your ideas on chat room. So we'd like to give a peek into your imagination, and we'd like to expand our imagination. While listening to the speeches, that one resonated deeply was those living animals like Korean salamanders of the Cheonsong Mountain, and the black-faced spoonbill, the golden bat, the animals who didn't receive the deserved rights. And we were able to learn cases in Ecuador and New Zealand. And it was just amazing to learn that the Constitution can be revised to give rights to the nature. And recently they were attempted to go back. However, the people's power have stopped such attempts, and I believe that our imagination and our long for change can make a great change. 2025 Green Conference now would like to coming to an end. Before we leave, that we need to do this. To celebrate this online gathering, we'd like to take a photo together. Please turn on your camera, and if it's possible, please change your background and use your item. Show your item, something related to the rights of the nature. And he is going to hold the book. So Mr. Hung is going to hold the book that he wrote. If you haven't turned on the camera, please turn on your camera. Looks like many of you are ready. Please join us. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. We will pose for the photo. Let's take the first photo. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Pose. Last one. This time. Although we can't hear our voices, that we'd like to shout together. Let's protect the rights of the nature. Let's shout out. 1, 2, 3. Let's protect the rights of the nature. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us until the last minute of the conference that I was able to learn a lot, and it was a great occasion that I can expand my imagination. After this conference that we're going to share a link for the survey on the chat room. Before you leave this room, that I'd like to know your reflection on our conference after this conference, that also you can find a link on the chat room. So please share your ideas about the conference. And please show your support by joining the survey. We're going to continue to imagine the rights of the nature at another occasion. I look forward to seeing you again. I'd like to now close the 2025 Green Conference, Rights of Nature, has come to an end. Thank you so much. My name has been, I've been your MC Park Eun-jung. Thank you.